Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our International Research Mobility Symposium. My name is Karen Schwartz. I'm Associate Vice President, Research and International at Carleton University and your MC for the first session. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to say that we acknowledge and respect the Algonquin people, traditional custodians of the unceded territory on which the university campus is situated. We are gathered today to discuss the benefits of traveling abroad to conduct international research. Such opportunities can influence our overall worldview and shape our academic capabilities. International mobility allows us to expand our network and develop lifelong friendships and invaluable research partnerships. We are pleased to have a wide range of speakers for all sessions. The audience includes students from Carleton University, South America, India, China, the Caribbean, Europe, Nigeria, Morocco, and others. We have representatives from consular offices, funding and government agencies, and NGOs. This strong interest speaks of the importance of international research mobility. The symposium was organized to highlight the amazing research conducted by students who have come to Carleton or Carleton students who have gone abroad, as well as researchers who are the pillars behind international research. The speakers will also focus on the intercultural experiences that enhance their research. The current pandemic poses unprecedented challenges when it comes to international travel, which has an impact on international research mobility. But we can already see how universities adapt to this new environment. For instance, here at Carleton, we offer a virtual visiting scholar program for those who can conduct their research virtually from their home countries. You will hear more about this in session D. The symposium stands as a testament to Carleton's continued commitment to championing internationalization. We recently released our first official international strategic plan, which sets a path to further enhancing Carleton's international impact and to better support the capacity of faculty and students to engage internationally. It reaffirms our commitment to serve our world and nurture global citizens. The symposium is possible thanks to the contribution of the federal government as part of the International Education Strategy, which aims at encouraging international study and research mobility. I would now like to invite Dr. Pauline Rankin, Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, to turn on her camera and to share a few opening remarks. Dr. Rankin is a political scientist with strong interest in domestic and global applications of gender mainstreaming and gender activism. As a leader, she has extensive experience in gender and development projects, offering strategic advice and capacity building training to governments and NGOs around the world. Dr. Rankin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz, and good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to offer some welcoming remarks to open this symposium. And I want to congratulate Carleton International for their initiative in organizing such an event at this particular historical moment. Let me begin with a warm welcome to the scholars assembled for this symposium. And by my account, the agenda includes participants from over a dozen countries, which is fantastic. Despite our collective experience of closed physical borders over the past 12 months, I believe that this is precisely the correct time to discuss building and rebuilding research relationships that span international boundaries. Now, it's not an exaggeration to say that many of us are longing to use our passports and are dreaming about future travel. In many ways, however, this period of relative physical confinement has inspired our creativity in maintaining global research relationships, and indeed has sparked many scholars, certainly here at Carleton, to reimagine their research in global terms. One of the core lessons of the pandemic is the need for international coordinated responses to the host of issues we will continue to face as a global citizenry. Climate change, displaced populations, food insecurity, and sadly but inevitably, future pandemics, to name only a few. Like many commentators, I suspect that this current period of isolation and social distancing will usher in an unprecedented period of international engagement. We are witnesses to a period in which multi-state scientific collaborations literally are pivotal to saving humanity. And as this period of extended crisis hopefully subsides, universities will remain central to generating the research required to confront the global priorities before us. I agree with Harvey Charles and Darla Deardoff, who argued recently that higher education must place global learning at the core of the academic enterprise in a post-pandemic context. As they remind us, quote, "The academy is the only societal institution with the breadth of intellectual resources that can be strategically marshaled to address these global challenges," end quote. Even before the pandemic, the pressing need for increased international educational mobility in the Canadian context was clear. Only 11% of Canadian undergraduates take on an international mobility experience over the course of their degree, yet 2/3 of employers have reported that Canada is at the risk of being left behind dynamic economies such as China, India, and Brazil, unless young Canadians learn to think more globally. Facilitating international student mobility, therefore, must emerge as a post-pandemic educational priority. Advancing outgoing and incoming opportunities, both for seasoned scholars as well as aspiring researchers, increases our chances for breakthroughs in all fields of inquiry. Even more critical to our collective future, perhaps, are the priceless opportunities that international research experiences afford us to learn about and from one another. And it is through those personal interactions and negotiations that cross-cultural knowledge and understanding most firmly take root. I know this holds true for each of today's speakers, and I look forward to hearing more about your insights and experiences of international research mobility. Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline, for your exceptional leadership at Carleton. Now we will hear a few words from three esteemed professors who have kindly agreed to share a few words with us today. First up is Dr. Fraser Taylor, the Chancellor's Distinguished Research Professor and Director of Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center, Geography and Environmental Studies at Carleton University. As a cartographer and award winner of international renown, Dr. Fraser has worked extensively around the world, in particular in East Africa and with Indigenous communities. He is also the general editor of Elsevier's Modern Cartography series. In 2019, he published 2 books on cartography, cyber cartography, his current research focus. Dr. Fraser will share stories and lessons from a lifetime of academic mobility. Dr. Taylor, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to talk this morning about some of the lessons and stories involved in international mobility. This is based on very extensive experience in over 50 countries and at least 150 research projects and countries. I'm currently working in Mexico, Brazil, Denmark, and Northern Canada, supported by a short grant. And one of the things I want to mention on academic mobility is that there is room for academic mobility inside Canada. For example, interacting with Inuit and First Nations people is just as important a learning experience as learning in an international context. 1 or 2 contextual remarks. Each activity is a new learning experience, even in countries you may have visited many times before. Each is unique, and there is much to be learned from the specificity of each situation. I find that even though I've been in a situation 20 times before, moving into the situation again gives me a unique opportunity and a new learning experience. My second contextual remark is that knowledge acquired during academic mobility sometimes is quite different from academic book learning, and you must be ready to challenge everything you've learned in the classroom. One of my early experiences in rural development in Africa, for example, is I had been taught all kinds of very important theories on development in the classroom. When I collected the information in the field, I found that none of the information fitted the theories. So as a good student, I decided that there must be something wrong with my data. Eventually, I discovered that it wasn't the data that was wrong, it was the theories, and I had to rethink some of my theoretical approaches on development theories. Now, most of my remarks today will be related to my work on rural development because in the time we have available, there's no way I could cover the many, many experiences and involves a multitude of different situations. In fact, if I tried to do that, I would have less than 1 second for each activity, and that wouldn't work very well. First, I would like to say, listen and observe what local people have to say and their stories. Visiting local markets, for example, is a great way to observe the beginnings of what's happening in society. Secondly, and most importantly, learning a local language is including nonverbal communication is of great importance. It's the key to interaction with local people, even if you are not fluent. It is a great help if you can, in fact, communicate at least a few ideas in the local language. Thirdly, taking a multidisciplinary approach is important. Understanding the cultural context in which you're working is important, even if your research does not cover that particular area. Understanding that context will help. The knowledge and vision of local people and generations of observations and relationships are in a sense, a parallel knowledge system. Do not assume that because they lack formal education, that the knowledge is of limited value. Above all, listen and respect what they have to say and pay attention to their stories. Now let me turn to a particular research project based on the east coast of Kenya on rural development. It was a rural development project involving surveys of many, many villages in the area. It involved 4 Carleton graduate students from different disciplines at Carleton involved in the project. 1 or 2 observations. We hired a series of mini moats, small vehicles, and the reason we picked those was they could be picked up and carried when they got stuck in the mud in the rural roads. Those of you who understand the difficulties of travel in some parts of East Africa, 1 or 2 tips. If your radiator springs a leak, try and find an egg. You can always find an egg in the local villages. Break the egg in the top of the radiator. It'll cook as it goes through the radiator and plug the gap. Those of you who are women, you will find that if your fan belt breaks, you can use pantyhose as an excellent substitution. One of the interesting observations was that power and water were being given to the hotels along the beach, but no power and no water for the people in the villages, only a few hundred meters away. Now they'd observed from the hotels that you have to have light bulbs for power. So they had acquired a series of light bulbs, and one gentleman had them stuck in the mud in his hotel. They also observed that there was a wire running from the main power lines to the hotels. So they had managed to acquire a number of coils of copper wire through various means, which I didn't want to discuss. And I caught them just before they had enough wire to climb up the pylons and plug into the power supply. At the same time as I was working there, there was a big soil survey going on through the World Bank with large numbers of people running around in Land Rovers and taking soil samples. The locals said to me, "What are they doing?" I said, "They're trying to find out where the best soil is to grow different crops." The answer, we know that already. So he sat down with me and we drew a little map in the dust. And he said, this is the area where you can grow maize. This is the area where you cannot do this. This is the area where you can grow that. And when I compared that with the $2 million soil survey, I got a 95% correlation. If they had asked the local people to start with, they could have saved themselves millions of dollars and at the same time learned a great deal. Now, in addition to that, I found that the locals, once they discovered that I was acceptable and amenable to discussion, the local Nganga, which roughly translated as witch doctor, which is a bad translation, but it'll do for now, said, look, I'd like to employ you as an apprentice. I was given instructions in 2 spells. One was how to ensure that your house would never be robbed or was unlikely to be robbed. And the second one was a charm to ensure that you weren't bitten by snakes in your house. And the gentleman who employed me explained how it worked. First, when you are paying a large sum of money to ensure that your house is not robbed, it's the same principle as in our society, where you put a notice in the window saying your house is protected by this company or that company. What you do is you have a large section of performance, and when the thieves come along, everybody in the district knows that house is protected, so they leave you alone. For snake bites, if you've spent a lot of money on a charm and a snake appears in your house, you know that you are protected, so you won't jump up and cause the snake to strike. Snakes usually will run away when given a choice. So if you don't panic, you're in much better condition than if you do panic.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for your valued insight. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak. Up next, we will hear from Dr. Artur Demchuk, Associate Professor in Comparative Politics at Moscow University in Russia. His academic interests include environmental policy and conflict management and comparative politics and international relations. He is a fellow of the Leadership for Environment and Development program. In 2000-2001, he was a Junior Faculty Development Program Fellow at the University of Michigan, and in 2006, a Fulbright Visiting Scholar at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, conducting research on environmental conflict management. Dr. Demchuk will be discussing his research as well as his experience visiting Carleton University back in 2019. Over to you.
Dear colleagues, I'm very thankful for invitation, for inviting me to participate in our symposium, to share my impressions and memories about my stay at Carleton two years ago. Fortunately, it was long before the pandemic, so I could enjoy all the opportunities. From mid-February to mid-April 2019, I was as a visiting scholar at Carleton University, hosted by Professor Piotr Dudkiewicz at the Department of Political Science, Institute of European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies. There was an agreement of cooperation signed between our 2 departments that presumed academic exchanges. So I was the first and the only one until now member of our academic staff who had a chance to visit Carleton University. The first arrangement I needed to make was visa invitation and all related paperwork, all of the formalities. And I am thankful to use this opportunity to thank Dr. Karen Schwartz and her colleagues because I got all the paperwork without delay and I got visa very smoothly. And sometimes for Russians, it's very hard to get visa to Canada, to the United States, and to the UK, for instance. Upon arrival to Carleton, it was very easy for me to get university ID, to get access to the library and other informational resources. It literally took just maybe a couple of hours to get everything done. And I was surprised comparing Canadian bureaucracy with bureaucracy in some other countries that I visited before. It took much longer time to get all the paperwork, to get all the authorizations, and Carleton, it was brilliant. Also, I enjoyed Carleton University campus infrastructure. It was very well planned and very convenient for visitors. I would say it is visitor friendly. I would say it's very easy to get around and you do not waste time. So you can, it's in the like optimal place for short visit, I mean. My host, Professor Petr Dudkevich, provided me with some advices before my visit and when I was planning it, and was ready to help anytime when I was staying at Carleton. And during my stay, again, thanks to Carleton University, I had everything I needed for my research. And my research is related to environmental policy and especially environmental conflict management. My research now was focused on Canada and North America, and also comparing it like comparative politics, comparative study of various national models of environmental conflict management, like Chinese model of environmental conflict management, Indonesia, European, Eastern European, and of course, including the experience of indigenous people. And we heard a lot about the experience with indigenous people. Canada and Russia, by the way, why I've chosen Carleton to visit and to do this research, because Canada and Russia have many similarities in terms of environmental policy and environmental issues. For instance, geography, we are neighbors in the Arctic, we have same problem with living in the north, we have similar climate zones, we have similar species of plants and animals, and so it's very important to study each other's experience of managing the environment and dealing with environmental conflicts. During my stay at Carleton, I had an opportunity also to take part in various activities at the Department of Political Science and other events at the university, including a couple of conferences and seminars where I gave some talks, and it was also very, very useful for me as a part of academic exchange, as a part of my research visit. And colleagues from the Department of Political Science and from other departments who deal with environmental issues were always available for appointment, ready to share their knowledge, experience, give some recommendations about what sources to use, where can I find some unique information I could not find back in Russia. Another very important part of my visit, because I'm a university professor, was related to teaching. And thanks to Professor Dudkevich and other colleagues, I had a chance to give several talks, to sit in classes and give several talks and answer students' questions on some topics related to Russian studies, including the situation with indigenous people in the Russian north. And this part of my experience helped me to know better academic tradition of Carleton, so how teaching process is organized, how curriculum is developed, and to learn and compare teaching methods, and of course to communicate with students, to get feedback from students. Also, since my visit was 2 months long, I had also a chance to visit Montreal to meet United Nations people working with international environmental policy, biodiversity convention, and other issues. And if I'm going to assess overall my stay at Carleton, I can just thank once again my host and all the Carleton people who made my stay fruitful from academic point of view, from scientific point of view, and pleasant from personal point of view. And I strongly hope that after pandemic, when pandemic is over, sooner or later, academic contacts and international cooperation will resume, will continue, and other scholars from Russia, from other countries will have a chance to participate in new academic mobility programs. They can visit Carleton University and get as wonderful experience as I got 2 years ago. And I also hope that Russian-Canadian academic relations will improve and develop, and our universities, our leading universities in our countries will make a very important contribution to it. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Demchuk, for sharing your experiences with us today. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Dirk de Bièvre, Professor of International Politics and Chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. He's written extensively on multilateral trade politics in the World Trade Organization, on European trade policy and the role of interest groups in public policy making. He is a partner in the Carleton Coordinated Jean Monnet Network on Transatlantic Trade Politics. Dr. de Bièvre will be discussing transatlantic EU-Canada relations. And you are there, yay! I will turn the stage over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen Schwartz, for inviting me and hosting this event. I'm very, very pleased to give a testimony on the value, the intrinsic value of academic mobility. I think it's absolutely key and of key importance to intellectual exchange at the student level, at the professorial level, and more generally for academic life to be healthy. I do deliberately choose the word healthy here, especially because we are in this strange period of time in which health is at the forefront of our preoccupations. And I've chosen to say to give the title to my little presentation as "Let us live, let us have life mobility." And it is absolutely key that Carleton University has this alive and kicking tradition and practice of encouraging international mobility to the extent possible. And I've had the privilege of being part of this Jean Monnet network of Jean Monnet network, I think it is called officially, on EU-Canada relations. And as you know, the Jean Monnet program is a program run by the European Union in which people can file applications to enhance academic mobility of staff, of collaborators, of students too. And it was at the initiative of the Institute of European Studies, the initiative taken by Professor John de Bardeleben, and Achim Hurelman was involved too, and then Krina Vicu-Milusevic was involved too. And these people have put together a small but involved set of people to enhance academic exchange between the University of Antwerp, where I am, a university in one of the Baltic states, Darmstadt in Germany. So it's a small group of people. It's not a big deal, but it is absolutely crucially important. And let me tell you why this is so important for us and for us as universities and as students. As we can notice now in this strange pandemic confinement constellation that most of us find ourselves in, social interaction is not just only a question of physical presence, it is also a question of emotional presence. And emotional presence, being close to each other, is something you can only achieve when you have physical mobility. So it sounds, just to say like, physical mobility is important, is actually underestimating its intrinsic importance. It is because we need to be emotionally involved with each other in order to be able as humans to learn from each other. And of course, academia, scholarship, intellectual curiosity can only work if we really engage with each other also emotionally. Because without trust being developed in an interpersonal relationship, you cannot withstand the harshness of criticism. You cannot withstand and learn from each other from disagreeing on scientific topics. You need trust for that. And in order to develop trust, we need to know each other. So it is absolutely crucial that international mobility is nurtured, is cherished by us as the university organizers, and why we need the support staff to do this. And I have had the enormous pleasure of seeing that at Carleton University, the support staff does this incredibly well. So I've worked with Kathleen Schmidt of the of the Institute for European Studies, and she is, of course, totally necessary to make this work, to keep this going, to organize these things, to make sure that what we're doing now actually gets done. And so direct interaction with each other as colleagues is important physically, is important socially, and is important emotionally. We need to know each other's character. We need to know each other's personalities to be able to work really well as scholars with each other. That's the first. The second thing is, of course, international mobility enables you to organize workshops, to organize conferences in a particular spot, and to have an intensive day of interaction. This is exactly what we did in the framework of our Jean Monnet network. We organized a whole day conference, and it's because you're able to have a little lunch and a little break together that you actually get to ask each other the really direct questions immediately when thinking about them. And therefore, it is not a luxury. It is not just, well, let's have a nice drink. No, we have the drink in order to be able to talk to each other directly. And we enjoy the food together because we can then engage intellectually with further discussions on the topics that interest us. And of course, in my case, this has been a conference on EU-Canada trade relations, because I'm a scholar of international politics and in political science, specializing in trade relations. And it's kind of obvious then that you want to talk to the Canadian side to know, okay, what exactly was the perspective of Canadian practitioners when engaging in trade negotiations with the European Union? And what was the view of scholars analyzing this international relation between the EU and Canada? And how did they view this process of negotiation and its outcome? So that's why having a conference then on EU-Canada trade relations in Ottawa is really important. It's not just some kind of international conference circuits tourism. No, it is of intrinsic necessary value. And then finally, absolutely key in the process of intellectual development for students, to be able for us as professors to speak to a student audience that is different from my students here in the Master Political Science or the Master International Relations and Diplomacy that we do at the university, to speak not to European students, but to speak to Canadian students, also international students, but located at a Canadian university. They ask us different questions. So we need to think differently from a different perspective about our topic. And of course, in politics, where you sit is where you stand is incredibly important. And therefore the stimulus of getting these creative, curious questions from students is of absolute necessity. It's not something optional to have, just a nice to have. No, it's not a nice to have. It is necessary for us to be confronted with those. It is stimulating for us to be confronted with those questions. And that's why going elsewhere and teaching elsewhere on these mobility programs is essential for us to stay healthy as intellectual searchers in the never-ending quest for knowledge that we are engaged in. So this is basically what I wanted to say. I think it is of crucial importance for us individually, and so I find it a privilege to have participated in that. There is a last point that I want to add. When things go really well, as things went in my particular case here, or within our broader Jean Monnet network, then of course you go, let's continue. Let's file for another program. And Achim Hurlman from the University of Carleton at Ottawa took the initiative to put together again an even more ambitious, I would say, Jean Monnet network. And we are very happy that this was approved too. And we called it this time the Jean Monnet Network on Transatlantic Trade Politics. And Achim Hurlman is coordinating that again at the Carleton for us. Now it's people from Salzburg, from the Delors Center in Berlin, from the University of Warwick. So again, a network of trade scholars being put together. It's a bit more specific on trade, and it's a bit broader in participation in European universities. And we are very happy that this continues our collaboration for the exact 3 reasons that I've tried to explain to you. It is important emotionally, socially, so that you get trust and you can actually engage in proper intellectual exchange at the level of professors, at the level of students, and facilitating the organization and the depth with which you can organize conferences and workshops in this context. So I think that is what I wanted to share with you, and I'm happy to again go to you, Karen Schwartz, and hear about questions or remarks that people might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bièvre, for sharing your expertise with us. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask all of the speakers to turn on their cameras. And what I will do is I have a number of questions that have been flooding in. And so I will go in order, 1 question each, and we'll keep going around as long as we have time. So Fraser and Artur, could you please turn on your cameras, or at least unmute yourself so that I know that you're here. Dirk, then maybe I will start with you, and hopefully everybody else will come on and we can go through the questions. So the question I have for you is, how do you envision we can maintain the personal linkages in a post-COVID-19 world?
Well, in general, I would expect things to go back to where we were in the successful collaboration schemes that we had as before. So I don't think we're going to see a total revolution like, now we're going to shift more things to online virtual contacts, because this is technically now all in place. Technically, this was in place in the past too. And it was no coincidence that we didn't use it that intensively, because we didn't have to. And we knew that actually the real benefit of close emotional and social contact is a necessary prerequisite to maintain a high level of intellectual exchange and intercourse. So I don't think there is going to be a big shift. I actually hope that we're not going to be forced into do a huge shift. They can, of course, complement each other. I mean, the fact that we actually are able to engage in some exchange here today is clear illustration that it is very productive. And you can talk to each other. You can convey insights to each other. You can reinforce links with each other. And I think we should, and we will. But it is only and only complementary. There is no either or here. And the key value will remain in physical presence, emotional engagement with each other, so as to enable intellectual exchange.
Thank you. Artur, I have a question for you. How has your visit to Carleton impacted your point of view of North America and things that you might not otherwise learn from Russia?
Well, I would say, thank you for this question. Well, it was actually not my first visit. I stayed for quite a long time in the United States, but my stay in Canada just improved my understanding about the difference between the United States and Canada. And in terms of my academic experience, I got much more information about and much more knowledge about indigenous people experience in environmental conflict management and environmental management, and about environmental mediation differences in Canada and in the United States. So it was more about knowing some national specific features of dealing with environmental issues and compare them. I would not say that I knew nothing about Canada, for instance, before. It was just about comparing and improving my knowledge. and getting most recent information and get to acquainted with most recent studies and the experience of specialists.
Thank you. Fraser, are you there? That's too bad, because Fraser, it seems, really touched a chord in terms of intercultural competencies. And so there are a number of questions about, how people can expand their intercultural competencies before they leave, and things about language. But since it doesn't seem like Fraser is here, I will pivot. I'm managing technology. I have questions coming in from everywhere.
If I may, Karen, I would like to endorse this point. I mean, the fact of using other languages is not just a question of de facto other languages. I myself am a hobbyist in having learned when I was young a lot of languages. I super enjoyed it. It was a kind of hobby of mine to study political science in different places and study it in different languages. But moving from one country to another physically also teaches you to try and understand other ways of talking about politics within the same discipline. And this is extremely important. You cannot do it at conferences, just at some kind of international conference. That's different. You need to immerse it's like a bath. It's immersion that works. It's only immersion that really has the effect of you have to now take that perspective of the other. And that is totally crucially important, especially in a social science discipline, and perhaps even more in political science than in other disciplines. But I suppose that it is even very similar in, I don't know, chemistry, because chemistry specialists have different usages of words in different academic traditions, and to learn to understand them from the inside out is going to be very, very important for you as a scientist. So I would like to expand on this idea of languages, and trying to immerse yourself in different languages is important, both when you talk to French, when you talk about political science or a discipline in French, Italian, German, English, or Dutch, or Chinese or Russian, but also in the way that we differently use a particular language, like English, in a particular scientific discipline. So I endorse the point doubly. And I see Fraser is now online, so maybe he...
Oh, okay. Fraser, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, actually. So the question was about intercultural competencies, and how can students start to gain some of those competencies before they leave? And then what strategies did you have for helping your students gain those intercultural competencies?
Well, for starters, for the particular one that I talked about, I in fact taught the 4 students Swahili for several months before they left. And I would take advantage of the language learning possibilities at Carleton to increase your understanding of the context, both culturally and linguistically, of the area you're going to. And several months in advance is a great help.
Thank you. Thank you. Artur, I wonder if you had thoughts about this. I'm sure there are intercultural differences between Russia and Canada, and how might you help students from Canada going to Russia deal with some of those intercultural differences and of course, language?
Well, of course, the main problem is not just cultural differences, because I don't think there are so many striking differences between Russia and Canada in terms of culture, but the language barrier is very important. Even we have Cyrillic alphabet that some students from Canada have problem with studying Russian language, but you have lots of Russians now living in Canada, so you can have conversation partners in Russian if you like. And I met several Russian students at Carleton University when we had these seminars on Russian studies. Usually when we give advice or consult our students who are preparing for academic exchange, of course, we ask them to study some history of the country they will be visiting, be it Finland or Germany or Canada or the United States. Fortunately, with Canada, United States, it's not a problem because I think 90% of Russian students now at school, they study English as a foreign language. Only very few students study French and German and very few Spanish, but most of the students and at the university, it's at our faculty, English language is like a mandatory subject for the first and second year if you have if you study for bachelor degree, so you have to improve your language skills. So students can read books, original books in English, can watch movies, and of course they need some knowledge from those who stayed in Canada, in the United States, about academic tradition, about personal interaction. Well, it's not like do's and don'ts or do's and don'ts as, for tourists, but we give them advice. For instance, that in Russia, we more rely on oral communication, or so it's okay to make a phone call to a professor, or maybe to stop by the department and just enter, knock at the door and ask professor some questions. Whereas in the North America, the different tradition, you rely more on written communication. You should write first an email, set up an appointment, because if you just stop by and say, oh, okay, professor, I have some questions to ask you, professor may be very surprised and even get offended that you have it without any previous notice, you just stop by. So we give just some clues. Of course, our students do not want to offend anyone, but they need to know those some practicalities, how it works. How it works in the North America, in American universities and Canadian universities. And it's very easy to learn and to memorize and to apply. So I have not heard of any problems of Russian students, our students from Moscow University who visited Canada or United States in terms of cultural misunderstanding or whatever.
Thank you. So I have one more question for all three of you. And what would you say are the key factors that contribute to growing, sustaining of international research relationships? So this might be after the intensive in-person workshop visit is completed, and then how do you go about sustaining those research relationships going forward? Fraser, maybe we'll start with you.
I think what's very important is to establish research partnerships in the countries you're working with and find funds which involve mobility in both directions. And finding effective partnerships, I think, is the key to sustainability over time.
Thank you. Dirk, Artur, would either of you, Dirk, do you want to jump in next and then we'll go to Artur?
Yes, and of course, Fraser is entirely right that this is an absolutely key precondition. But in my experience, what you also need on top of that is just one person taking the initiative. If there is one entrepreneur in your group of people that you trust, that you value, that you know are going to be complementary and are going to help each other, not just say, we have the same expertise, so let's bundle together. No, we have complementary expertises. So we actually will reinforce each other because you know stuff that I don't, and I am able to do this, whereas you aren't. Then you have complementarity, so that's nice. Then your networks are good. But then you need just one person that says, okay, I'm going to take the initiative and put together a next application or a next formal institutional framework within which we are going to do this work together. And then everybody goes like, yes, great, we're following. Just tell us what we need to do. And if you have one entrepreneur like that in the group, things go really nicely well.
Thank you. Artur.
Well, I entirely agree what was said. The role of leadership is very important, and it's very important that people who work at the same topic or are interested in each other's experience meet, preferably in person. Yes, physically meet, that they can be somehow emotionally exchanging not only knowledge, not only information, but also emotions. They may become friends and long-term partners in reading books and articles. And how it worked in our case, Piotr Dudkiewicz visited Russia several times, and he was invited to our department to give several talks. And then he asked, okay, we have some students interested in Russian studies. You have students interested in Canada. Why don't we establish sort of partnership? So he became this leader. And from our part, we also found people. I was interested in cooperation, and other professors and students who are interested in cooperation. So we established like a small group who was jointly making decisions, discussing various ways of cooperation. And so we are interested in communication with each other, in interaction with each other, with some joint projects, joint publications, conferences, and so on. And I hope that we'll move on after the pandemic. We'll resume our contacts to full strength, and we'll promote further our cooperation.
Well, thank you very much. So this concludes session A. We're going to be moving into sessions where students are going to be talking about their research and their experiences. And so I hope they've all been listening carefully, because they will be the next leaders to carry on international research projects and to carry on these international collaborations. So it's exciting to hear from the new leaders in international research. Thank you all for your wonderful contributions. I think we've all learned a lot. So thank you all very much.